Hi everyone, like I said in the last video, I want to try something new in this year, and this is a tip video for beginners. I'm not a pro by any means, and I'm just sharing what I found, so please just think of it like advice from your friend. And the first one is a basic straight cutting with chisels, and the Bowtie Inlay as a practice. It's not as difficult as you think, and I'll share with you how to avoid potential mistakes. I'll use these chisels and this drill to make the mortise, and use this hand plane to clean. First thing I want to highlight is the resistance and force created by a chisel. A chisel of course has a bevel, so when you line up your flat side of the chisel on the marking line to cut straight, the chisel moves out of the line because of the resistance. To avoid it, I usually pound 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch away on the waist side from the marking line first, and then cut it on the line. In this way, the waist side has a room to move when cutting on the marking line, and you get a clean line. This is very important technique to initiate a clean fabrication and avoid tear out on the edge. The next thing is slicing a waist. When you clean up the waist on the marking line, you should slice it off a little by little. I'm using only 1/4 of 1 inch wide chisel and repeat the same process until I reach the other end of the wood. The previous cutting section will guide your chisel to go straight down. I usually reduce the thickness of the slice and use whole chisel blade for a clean finish. When there is a good amount of the thickness until the marking line, you can use a mallet, but still don't try to remove a lot at a time unless you know how well your chisel can cut, or the fibers inside the board will break. The good thing is, if you can do well on these two techniques, you will most likely have a clean mortise for a Bowtie inlay. Now cutting the bowtie. For me, I don't have a bandsaw, so cutting this bowtie is a lot more difficult than cutting a perfect mortise, but here is about the chisel practice. So I'll skip how to cut the bowtie. Please be sure all 4 sides of the bowtie are square. Okay, let's work on the mortise. First, I put the double CA glue on the bowtie and put it on where I want to embed this bowtie. The grain has to be perpendicular. Now I use an X-Acto knife, but I think a marking knife or one with a thicker blade works better. As long as you can see the line, you don't have to square it strongly. Here are 2 tips. If you really want a clean finish, don't overrun the knife at the outside corners, or you may have a tiny breakout. On the other hand, you should be clearly marking the inside corners. This is very important to have a well-defined bowtie. The next tip is, not necessarily you really do, but you should have an intention to mark under the bowtie like the picture. The mortise can run the small side like 1/64 to 128 inside the outline of an actual bowtie. Then, like I mentioned, I'll pound about 1/16 of an inch inside of the marking line by chisels. This distance depends on the material, chisel width, or pound strength, but you will find the right amount. Then I push my chisels on the actual marking line to cut like 1/32 of an inch deep. You can pound the chisel, but I just didn't think I needed to. Now remove the waste by a drill driver. If you want to reduce the chisel work, You can draw lines like me to be sure you bore out the waste efficiently. I usually do this when I don't want to mess up. In addition, please be sure to use a Forstner bit or broad point bit. I suck at using a drill driver, so I put the painter's tape to control the depths, but it doesn't usually go well. Then I work on cleaning the mess. First, I will work on connecting all the holes. This one, as there are a lot of materials in between, I used a mallet, but I did most of them by just hand pressure. Rather than going from the sideway to hit it, it's always good to cut it like a V shape that reduces the resistance. It always works better for me. After connecting all of them, I will need to work on cutting fibers until the inside line. You always need to cut the fibers across the grain first for a clean finish. Here, I use a mallet as it has still good enough amount of material left to the final line. At this moment, I'm also finding if there is a weird grain that interferes with the chisel to go in. This final cut to the inside line is a practice of the real final cut on the outer line. And then, once there is a lot of cutout waste, cleaning inside helps with the visibility. When I finish cleaning up the mess, now it's time to get the correct depths I want. I can't work on the depths once I finalize the outer line, because it may break the crisp outer line, so here, I should try to get as clean of a bottom as possible. Like I said, I messed up the drill depths, so I can't get the flat bottom. I wanted to do a perfect job to demonstrate, but it happened. Now I approach the final outline, but here is the thing. 1/16 of an inch is too thick for my cheap chisel, so I slice it only a half. And I always start my chisel from the inside corner to the outside, so I can make a good reference line by the first quarter of an inch of the cut. In addition, after the fiber cut, I also slice the same amount of the side walls. This helps when working on the outside corner. The outside corner is the most difficult part, so you should cut it very carefully and always approach to the corner when cutting across the grain. Now it looks good. This chisel can do the job. This is a final step. I chamfer the bottom edge of the bow tie. Please do not cut your finger when handling a small piece. Here's an unusual process to the Western woodworking, but I do kigoroshi, which is compressing wood a little bit. I just lightly tap the bow tie with a hammer. It will become back to the original size when it swells by glue moisture. As long as it fits in, you don't have to worry about if the bow tie actually gets bigger than the Mortise with the moisture. The thing is, most of dried wood still contains 6 to 8% of moisture, and it will be anyway gone and lose the density as time goes. So that's why you see some old joints have a gap, but this kigoroshi helps keep a tight joint for a long time. This has lots to do with grain orientations, but maybe I will do another tip video if you like to watch my chisel session. Okay, you see me put a lot of glue and wiped it with a wet paper towel. I believe I was cleaning up the glue as well as feeding moisture to the bow tie to get it back to the original size. Now I got trim it. I see many people do a hand plane or flash cut by a saw and sand it when the glue is still wet. But I don't do it because I only have a wooden hand plane. So I usually wait for the glue to dry overnight, but this time I only waited a few hours. I like to cut it with a flash trim saw, but I don't use it just in case you don't have it. So I just use the hand plane and that's it. Isn't this tight? Anyways, how was it? Was it good that I should share more tips I researched and found in the past projects? Or should I focus more on new projects? Please let me know, and I guess that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I would be happy if you liked the video and happier if you subscribe to this channel. If you have any suggestion to my video, it's also welcome. See you!